Thank you everyone for joining my talk. I know today there are a lot of sessions you can choose between from, so I'm really happy you decided to go to this one. I hope you all had a good lunch. I had a really nice currywurst earlier. Good recommendation here in Berlin. But today, I'm going to show you how to implement iOS extensions into your app, and hopefully after this talk you won't be scared of doing that anymore. So to start this presentation, hey Siri, start this presentation. Yeah, it worked. This was an iOS extension. I'm happy it worked this time. Okay, so before we start with the actual presentation, let me tell a story about implementing my first iOS extension. It was actually the share extension, and when I added it for the first time, I had like 20 files. I opened Xcode, I edited, and I was so scared of what I just did because my iOS app stopped building for some reason. So it can be a very stressing process. So I hope after this talk you won't have the same experience or run into the same issues as me. Okay, but first I want to get the audience, get to know the audience a little bit today. So can you tell me, have you implemented an iOS extension more than 3 times? Then raise your hand. Okay, we've got some people, cool. If you implement it in just once or twice, then do this. Okay, so also some people. And do we have people that never implemented an iOS extension? Oh, nice, oh, nice. Okay, then hopefully you will learn something here today. So I brought you this map. We will go on a journey together. We will start at the green point and then go through the widget pond. At the first stop, I will showcase a lot of different extensions you can implement. Then we will go a bit to the east and learn at the next stop how to implement an extension. On the third step, we will then embed Flutter inside an iOS extension. And at the end, all the top over there, you will get the knowledge and the key to success to more money, because after implementing an iOS extension, users may click your app more, and that is, of course, good revenue. Okay, so let me introduce myself first. I'm not a dog, but my name is Lucas Goldner. I'm 24 years old, German-Brazilian. I'm a Flutter and Dart GD since September, I think now. Time goes by fast recently. I'm also an organizer of Flutter Tokyo meetup, so I'm based in Tokyo and came all the way from Japan here today. And I'm working at a Japanese company called Utrust, where we build pretty much like a LinkedIn for Japanese, so you can't actually try it, but it's a cool app. Yeah. So before I showcase you some iOS extensions first, let's talk about what is an iOS extension, because there are so many different ones. One simple one would be this share extension over here. So you know, in the photos, in the gallery app, if you select a photo, there comes up the share sheet, and inside of the share sheet, in this row here, there are some apps, and if your app appears here, you have probably implemented the share extension, and then you can use the share extension to send this photo into your application if you want to share it, for example, in a social media network or something like that. So basically, an iOS extension, you have your app, the extension, and the iOS host app. The iOS host app, of course, has the Flutter view controller in which your Flutter app runs inside of. And the extension is then like a separate application inside of your bundle. It's not directly inside of the iOS app, but it communicates between the iOS app and the extension if you set it up to. Okay, before we go to the next slide, so some people here are pretty knowledgeable on extensions. Can you just shout out some extensions that you know? Widget extension, yeah. Live activities, yeah. Okay. What? Code extension. Ah, notification. Yeah, there is. Okay, I will talk about that one later. Yeah, there's a notification extension. Actually, there are so many. I just put them all on this quick overview over here. I will just read out some, like the hotspot authentication, the app intents extension. There's an audio unit extension, print service extension, identity document provider, quick look preview extension, Safari extension, iMessage extensions. There's so many. There's of course, a page in the Apple documentation summarizing all of them. But there's so many of them, I will just showcase you due to time constraints, like some that I would recommend to implement or are beneficial for your app. So the first one, as someone said earlier, the widget extension. What this allows you to do is you can create a widget on your home screen. Maybe some of you already have a widget on your home screen from other apps, and this extension allows you to do that. You can put some UI on there, and it's not very interactive, but you can like press on it and be routed inside of your app. And yeah, this is probably one of the most common ones. Then we got the share extension I talked about earlier. You select a photo, or if any app implements the share sheet and it comes up, if your app also implements the share extension, it can then show up inside of this row and then get the data to be shared into your app. Then there's the action extension, which actually you can see over here. Below this list of apps, there are those actions over here, like copy photo, add to album, and your app can define their own actions, and those actions can then be triggered to, for example, send this image also to your app or copy the photo, something like that. There's the photo editing extension, a pretty rare one. But if you're developing, for example, a photo editing application, on iOS there's this edit button, and then you come to the edit screen. And if you select then this button over here, all apps that support editing photos can then be shown inside of this list. So if you're developing some media app like that, you probably want it to show up over here as well. Then there's the app intents extension, which I actually showcased on my first slide when I said, hey Siri, start this presentation. So this is an intent that can be run inside of your app, similar to the action extension. And this can be then triggered from Siri, or also be used inside of the Shortcuts app. You know, maybe you haven't tried it, but there's this shortcut app on iOS by default, which you can then define a shortcut. And if you have an action defined there, you can also select the action. For example, a shortcut could be, if I get near to my home using the GPS, then trigger this action, for example. This is something you could do. Then maybe you meant that extension earlier, the notification content extension. Actually didn't know about that one, but I think I will implement it soon. So basically, if you have a push notification, you can actually customize the push notification layout using this, creating a custom UI for it, which helps make your app stand out a little bit more. So I would recommend looking into it. Then, I mean, we're here in Europe. Most of us probably don't use iMessage, but for the Americans here, so iMessage, there's an iMessage extension and iMessage stickers extension. The stickers one just add a sticker pack, but the iMessage extension is pretty rich. What you can do with, I had one app where I downloaded and it had an iMessage extension, and it allowed me to play games inside of iMessage with my partner. So I could, for example, invite him to golf, and then he got a request to join golf, and when he pressed on the message, there was a full screen golf game inside of the iMessages app, and then we could play back and forth. So you can do a lot of stuff like mini apps inside of iMessage. I wish we had something like this, for example, on WhatsApp as well, but at least for iMessage, there's this cool option. Then Safari extension. So similar to Chrome extensions, you have also a Safari extensions on iOS, which you can then manage. And some examples would be, for example, 1Password, which allows you to save or just use the password directly. Or something like Grammarly, where if you edit a text, it could recommend you to automatically correct it. So in those cases, maybe an extension would make sense. Maybe something like an ad blocker would be nice. Then we got the network extension. If you're building something like a VPN, then you definitely need this. Otherwise, you can't program your app for this extension. So yeah, in that case, like doing things with network, a lot of things you can do. I would recommend you to read the documentation here. But for VPN apps, definitely you will need this. And the last extension, sorry. Yeah, this. Okay, we can see it on the slide. There is the Spotlight extension. So if you search if you search on the home screen something, usually there are apps, but there are not only apps, but also like other content. Like, for example, if you have a news app, you could use this content inside the extension to index the content inside of your app. And this would let your content appear inside of this search overview. So if you have a news app or something with content you want to be searchable by keywords directly in the home screen, then you should try to implement this one. Okay, but enough about different extensions. Let's build one. We will build today the action extension, of course in a simplified manner, so you can understand it. So the action extension works similar to the share extension. We will need our share sheet. So first we select a photo, then we have triggered a share sheet, and inside of the share sheet we have then our actions in this list below here. And if we click on it, I want to trigger some small UI and then send the data of what I shared inside of my app. So every time we want to implement an extension, we need to open Xcode. I know we need to. And we go to File, Create New, and add a target. And inside of this target, you get all of the extensions. There will be a big list, but in this case, we just want the action extension. Then we need to do something in the build phases, reorder the build phases. Actually, this step, embed foundation extensions, need to be before run script, otherwise it won't be bundled inside of your app. And then we should also make sure that the minimum deployment version matches with our runner app, otherwise we could get some funky mismatch errors over there. And one of the most important parts is setting up the info list correctly. So extensions also have an info list, like a normal iOS app. It's basically just a list of properties. On Android, you can compare it with the Android manifest. And inside of this extension, we don't need every time the app group ID, but we should set it. I will talk about app groups later in this talk. But for now, I also set that. Then we have this NS extension, which has NS extension attributes property, which has an NS extensions activation rule property, which has an NS extension activation supports image with max count property. And that is very important because if we don't, in my case, we want the action extension to show up if we select an image. So we need to set this property. In this case, I set it just to 1. So if you select one image, this will show up. You can also, of course, expand it and put like 5 images over here. That's not a problem. And there are other activation rules you can also look up, but I just needed this one. And there are other properties, but this activation rule is probably one of the most important. Then when we select not our Flutter app, but the extension, it's hidden right now, but over here, where you select the target normally, you can then get this specific window where you can select which app to start it from. Since we are testing with photos, I decided to use the Photos app, and then the simulator or your device will not run your Flutter app, but the Photos app with the extension already loaded to test. In this case, I had a very delicious meal some days ago, which I tested it with. And then I press on the share button, which then will trigger the share sheet. And inside of here, you can see I developed a lot of extensions. And in this case, the Golden Photo Import extension. If I click on that, I will then get a UI popping up with my image inside of it and this import button. The UI for this extension was made with Storyboard, but there are also extensions like the widget kit, which uses Swift UI. So it depends on the extension on what you need to implement. For our extension, we just had a simple button and a UI image view. Then we come to the code. It's long. It's a big wall. So don't worry, I will try to break it down for you so you can understand it simply. But before we do that, we need to talk about the earlier mentioned app groups. So the app groups are very important. They allow us to communicate between the extension and our iOS app. An app group needs to have an app group ID defined. And using the app group ID, we can then use the user defaults on iOS, which are the shared preferences which we usually use on Flutter, and then save key store values inside of this user defaults using the same app group identifier. We can then get the same data on our Flutter app that we save in the extension. But not only values like that can be saved. Okay. Okay, it came back. Cool. Yeah, as I said, we can not only save key store values, but also files using the file manager, and then create a container using, of course, the same app group identifier, and then save files inside of there. So pretty useful. And we need to set it up correctly, otherwise our extension and our app can't communicate. The first thing I did inside of my extension is, so our extensions have an extension context when we use the action extension, and this has a list of input items, which is a NS extension item. And these input items have attachments, and those attachments have providers. And if this provider conforms to this specific UT type image identifier, then we know this image, this attachment that we have, is an image. And if we know it's an image, we can then use the same provider to load that item using the same image identifier. It's all specific stuff, so don't worry. And if we have loaded our item, we either get an error or we get an image URL. And if we have the image URL, we can then, in my case, set the image URL inside of the UI image view, and then it will be displayed inside of the extension like earlier, as I am doing here, image view.image, and setting then using the image URL. So now we received the data inside of our code, and we displayed it in the UI view. The next step that I wanted to do is save the file inside of our app group in the container. So I created a path, file name, a path over here, and in the file manager, I then put, using the app group ID, of course, the data inside of into it using the path. And then in my case, since I have a lot of extensions set up in this app, I wanted to know from which extension I'm receiving the data from. So I created a small imported file class, which then gives me the path and the name of the file. And then I save it inside of my class. And using the user defaults, I'm then saving this object as a key here with the shared key, and then saving it using synchronize. And then basically all of the data is stored for my iOS app to access. And the last part is then returning to our iOS app. I created a deep link over here with the bundle ID of the iOS host app, and then setting the key that I want to read from. Of course, on your app, depending on your context, you can do a different link. In my case, I adjusted that. And then using some specific Swift code here, we then open the URL, and if that is performed, then our app will be opened with the deep link and the data that I send into. And if that is successful, we complete the extension context, which means the extension will then close again. And yeah, this was it. Nice. We got it to run. So what we did here is create an extension. We created an app group. We implemented the UI using, in this case, the storyboards. Then we implemented the data sharing using the app group IDs. And I created a small deep link to launch into my app using the data that I need. And now it's ready to ship. Nice. I wanted to ask you, like we reached like the half point of this talk. Who here actually likes Swift more than Dart or Flutter? Okay, that's a good question. Okay, let's say Swift UI since that's more modern. Okay, there are some people, cool. Okay, UI kit lovers maybe? No? Okay, then just Swift UI. But we got some people, cool. On the other side, who would rather never open Xcode again? Oh, those are a lot of hands. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't feel like that. I would just try to reduce it. So that's what we are going to do in the next step. We are going to do an iOS extension with Flutter. Not all of it, but most of a good part of it. So 4 stable releases ago, there was this feature shipped. If you have an extension, for example, our share extension from before, and then use it here, a Flutter screen will come up. Cool, right? So that's what I'm going to show you folks now. First, of course, we need to add an extension again, like we did before. We need to add a new target. I did again the action extension. Then we needed to, it's in the documentation, of course, everything. We needed to disable user script sandboxing and add a specific pre-action to our build in the extension. And then we need to make sure all of those configs are using the same config, so our iOS app using the same debug config as our extension, of course for release and profile as well. And then the Flutter part is pretty simple actually. As you can see, the code here is pretty small. So in the view did load of this view controller, which is basically like an init state in our stateful widget, we call show Flutter function. And this show Flutter function creates a Flutter engine. And we run the Flutter engine, and then we put this create a Flutter view controller using this Flutter engine, and then we set this Flutter view to the bounds of our iOS extension, and yeah, that's basically it. Then, as we saw earlier in the GIF, the Flutter app will then show up. But there are some constraints you have to watch out for. Actually 3. So first one, to test, you should use an iOS simulator in debug mode if you want to try it out. The reason for that is like for memory. So Flutter doesn't, so the iOS apps extensions have a limit of 100 megabytes. So actually the Flutter engine that you're starting in the extension is not the actual Flutter extension, but Flutter engine, but like a smaller version of it, so it can run inside of this extension. So you won't have all of the same features, but probably enough of the features you need. And if you test it, you should watch out that you do as less as possible, otherwise you could get over this 100 megabyte limit, and then your extension won't even trigger if you press on the button. That's what happened to me sometimes, so you have to be careful there. You could use profile mode to test if everything is running correctly and look at the memory, of course. So that's something you have to look out for. And on this part, I just want to promote my Medium quickly, since I'm going to actually start a series of covering all of the iOS extensions. And I want to try make it as simple as possible, and of course with a lot of images and stuff, and explain how to implement each one. So there are a lot of articles already covering some extensions, but I want one series I can refer people to do it easily. So if you have some requests for some specific extension that you want earlier, then just reach out to me and I will do it as soon as possible. I'm committing to 1 article a month, and let's see how many months it will take me. Okay, then to summarize a little bit for the iOS extensions, as I said earlier, with the memory limit, you definitely want to make sure to make as small a small process is possible. Otherwise, you will maybe run into the memory limit. So yeah, keep it lightweight. Just get the data and ship it to your app, I would say. The next thing is if you want to share data, use an app group. And test, of course, on not only on the simulator, but later when you have deployed it on test flight, for example, also on your physical device, as sometimes you won't. Sometimes the memory could be a bit different with testing on debug all the time, and then on the profile mode or release mode. So make sure to check it before you ship it. So yeah, this was basically it. Thanks for your attention. So today there were actually a lot of people, which surprised me at Fluttercon. So let's follow each other on X, get to know each other, and these slides were all made with Flutter Deck. So this all was actually in a Flutter app, which made it possible to run the extension in the first slide. So thank you for watching, and yeah, let's have a Q&A.